Welcome to I Hate James Dobson, my excuse to start drinking at noon on a Sunday.
I never knew you didn't need an excuse for that.
Welcome to I Hate James Dobson. My name is Jake. I'm a former evangelical turned queer sex therapist. And today I'm once again joined by the good witch of the North, Brooke. Hi, Brooke.
That's amazing. Hi. That's Glenda.
It is Glenda.
You know, she was my favorite Wizard of Oz character when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah, because she was like a pink princess, and I liked that. And she was in a bubble, which I liked. And also she was like a little low-key bitchy, which I also kind of liked.
Absolutely. Boyfriend loves the are you a good witch or a bad witch? Well, only bad witches are ugly. It's like, excuse me. Then why'd you ask me?
Yeah, from an early age, I think I clocked some of that, and I was like, oh yeah, Linda.
Brooke, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It is St. Patrick's Day weekend. So happy St. Patrick's Day weekend, I suppose. We live in Chicago, which takes it very seriously.
Yeah, and I never have before, but I did this weekend. And I drank one cocktail, and it was green, and it was so gross that I wasn't sure I'd be able to finish it, but I did, because I'm Midwestern and we pulled through.
I'm not sure that's an accomplishment, but I'll say congratulations anyway.
Thank you. It was like melted toothpaste with whipped cream on top with Lucky Charms on top.
Sounds delicious.
You know what? I also had pancakes with Lucky Charms on them at the same place. Those were delicious. I am here to tell you something, Jake, which is that in the 80s, when I was a small child, there was this thing as healthy cereal and not healthy cereal. And there was a lot of unhealthy cereal aimed at kids. I don't think they even have all of this anymore. But it was like all you would ever want was the junky cereal. And then my parents would just only buy Cheerios. But when we would go on vacation and stuff, we were allowed to get whatever cereal we wanted. And I would always want Lucky Charms. And here's something for everyone parenting out there. And here's my parenting advice on this parenting podcast. I, to this day, go and buy boxes of Lucky Charms sometimes and hide them in my house and then eat them in the night.
What do you mean hide them?
So that's what you'll do if you don't let your children have Lucky Charms.
Hide them how? From whom?
From myself. We'll just cut this part.
I love it. Instead of saying let's cut it, I'm going to start saying that's a Patreon exclusive.
Hey, we had fun at our Patreon thing.
We did.
I kept calling it the podcast.
Yes. The podcast is a blog. The live stream is a podcast. We're doing great.
Yep. When we have a live show, that'll be the live stream.
Amazing. We did have our first live stream, and it was delightful. I had such a good time.
Well, me too. That was fun. We're still learning. We're going to figure it out.
Yeah, I have ideas for more structured segments next time.
Great.
If you want to join us, our next stream will be on Monday, March 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Central Time. Check out patreon.com/IHateJamesDobson for all the details. Ding.
Ooh, you sounded so profesh.
Thank you. I did about 14 different takes of how to do the credits with all of that in there. Okay. So, and now it is time for Brooke's Books, the part of the show where Brooke comes out to talk about books.
Hey, book lovers. I made a note this time. I would like to thank everybody who suggested that I listen to Middlemarch on audiobook. I went back to Audible, which I forgot I had. And I forgot I was halfway through the Prince Harry autobiography.
Oh.
So don't read that.
Feeling very British today.
Yeah, very British. So I've been listening to Middlemarch nonstop, and I've gotten so far. Now I'm on page 300, which is incredible, out of 800, but still. And it's going great. And now I'm really enjoying it. And now I understand who all the characters are. And it's wonderful. So thank you to everyone who suggested that. Now, on with the books. I finished the Sacred Stone series. It was fine. So so read that if you're looking for it. But the more exciting news is that my favorite fairy smut series is coming back in October, which I think some people know if they care. And that's big news. Everyone's really, really excited. I also read, I don't often read Help My Perimenopause Brain, not comic books.
Graphic novels?
Graphic novels, thank you. Whew, this is getting harder and harder. I read one called Are You My Mother by Alison Bechdel. You might know the Bechdel test. Yeah.
I love Bechdel.
Yeah. I read Fun Home last year, the graphic novel.
Fun Home is incredible.
Yeah. And then she has one about her mother. And that's the one I read. And it was very good. And also, I like graphic novels when they're not about like superheroes and stuff.
I would say Alison Bechdel's kind of a superhero.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean. And then the other one that I read was for book club. Book club changed because we are tired of reading intergenerational stories. We've read many of them. So now we're just doing international, like books from different countries. And so we read Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay. And it was one of the like most bananas books I've ever read. You look at the cover and you're like, oh, that just looks like a little droll Victorian picnic story. No. It was written in the 60s, which I didn't realize. And it was a wild time for fiction. And it really goes off the rails, let me tell you. Do some schoolgirls turn into lizards? I don't know. You find out. But it was really good, and I loved it. And it's Australian, and we are going to go to Outback Steakhouse to discuss it over an Awesome Blossom.
Incredible. Get that bloomin' onion.
Yeah, because that's our version of traditional Australian food. Don't at me. And that is all right now for Brooke's books because, I'm also reading, Introduction to Internal Family Systems and Mother Hunger is the new Middlemarch, and Infinite Jest and Middlemarch.
And that menopause book that you showed me before we started recording.
Yeah, but I haven't started it yet because I'm scared of what I'll find out. But that'll be coming up. That'll be a Patreon exclusive. And that's all from Brooke's books. Do love books. Here they are. You can read them in your car. But if you do, you'll have a crash. So don't do that or else you're trash. Unless you have them on Audible. It makes reading wonderful.
There are many times in the show where I'm like, I put in hours upon hours of research and writing and crafting and editing, and then you just pull the most incredible thing that I could never do if I tried. And I'm like, what? Why do I even try? I don't know. That's brilliant.
Rhyming. It's so stupid. Oh, God. That was my commercial for Audible. I hope they use it. I hope they're like, Audible, brought to you by I Hate James Dobson. Okay. I have talked about this before, but I use Storygraph to track all of my reading. Yeah. It's basically like a social media site. So if you want to friend me on Storygraph, lit readers, you can. I'm not going to friend you on Instagram or Facebook or other places, probably. No offense. But you can friend me on Storygraph. Why? Just to see what books I'm reading? You can already hear that here on I Hate James Dobson.
People want to know. We on our Patreon, we started a running list of Brooke's books, starting from when the Patreon launched. We're not retroactively doing it. And I've received multiple notes of people telling me to tell you to fill it in, as if you're the one who fills it in.
Okay, I'll fill it in soon. I'll send it. Cool. All right, what are you torturing me with today?
Our work of Shart today is a book deep in the vault of Dobson. I asked boyfriend for multiple, is that more funny or more juvenile? And we landed on more funny. I like it.
The more juvenile, the more funny.
My version of this book was published in 1975, but it's not the original version. So to orient us to the Dobson timeline, Dare to Discipline, Ka-Chow came out in 1971. Dobson quit the APA, the American Psychological Association, in 1973 after they took out homosexuality from the DSM, so it's no longer considered a mental illness. He had a hissy fit about it, quit the APA, but he was still an associate clinical professor of pediatrics at the University of Southern California School of Medicine at this time. That was still going on when this book was published. So as we're going through this, remember, this is the writing of a person actively teaching clinical pediatric psychology at a hospital.
Okay.
He was on his way out, though. He left that role in 1976, and he founded Focus on the Family in 1977. So this book is pre-thought it's BF. Bettridge's law of headlines postulates that any headline that ends with a question mark can be answered by the word no. Well, this isn't a headline, but the message remains the same. Our book today is called Emotions. Can you trust them?
Oh my God.
There's a pattern that we've talked about before, but it's so important, I think, for us to talk about again. So we're going to start by retreading old ground. Brooke, Dobson repeats himself, like, a lot. We've actually talked about emotions. Can you trust them?
Yeah, actually, you know what's funny? I just heard about this book because, maybe I shouldn't admit this. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm still reading Wild Faith because it is so hard to read in terms of making me angry that I read like one chapter and then I go 2 months and read another chapter. So it's a great book. I'm just being slow about it. But I've been really tearing it up lately. And I think that she mentions this book at some point in there. There was this part where I was like, I'm learning a lot about James Dobson from this book. And then I was like, that's like when clients are like, I'm feeling so much better because of my boyfriend. Cut that part.
Oh, I love it. We've talked about before because there's a movie that Dobson put out called Emotions, Can You Trust Them? It was part of the Life on the Edge series.
Oh, yeah.
So we've talked about this before. But these are separate works. They have the same title. The book is kind of the movie, but it's also kind of its own thing. The movie feels kind of like a lazy adaptation. But there are both books and movies for other Dobson works as well. What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women is a book, and also, I think, 2 movies. The Strong-Willed Child, Bringing Up Boys, and more. Usually the books come first, from my understanding. They're always related to each other, but to what degree can vary significantly. And the books themselves have been published and republished and altered sometimes, kind of. In our Dare to Discipline Ka-Chow episode, I read 3 versions of the book. One of the first printings, a reprint, and then an update of the reprint. 1 and 2 were pretty different in structure. There's things added, there's things changed. 2 and 3, there's most of it was identical to each other. He repeats himself. It's really hard to keep track of the timeline of what things came out when. And in his writing, he quotes other works of his. Famously, at least to me, at one point he tried to organically plug one of his books through a folksy anecdote that ended with the moral, by Dare to Discipline by James Dobson, Tyndale.
Mm-hmm.
And our book today is no exception to any of this. Firstly, he quotes himself quite a bit in this book. The first time he copy and paste something from another Dobson book is on page 3.
Oh my God.
Of the introduction.
It's not research if you are researching yourself and quoting yourself.
The direct quote from himself lasts for 5 pages of the introduction, and the introduction is 8 pages. So the introduction by volume is primarily just a direct quote from another book of his.
Get out. He is so ballsy.
And that's not even all. In addition to directly citing himself, sometimes he just rips entire passages without citation. Chapter 2 of 4 in this book, I think, is almost entirely word for word in other books. We'll talk about it when we get there. And even the source material is republishing of other shit. Like I said, my copy is from 1975. On the publishing page, it notes, quote, that this was originally published under the following titles. Dr. James Dobson talks about guilt. Dr. James Dobson talks about love. Dr. James Dobson talks about anger. And Dr. James Dobson talks about God's will. So this entire book, these 4 chapters, are just reprints of 4 related but kind of disparate works that are now packaged together. I assume some changes were made to make it flow better, but I don't have the originals because they're impossible to find, so I can't tell you. A couple things about this. I think this is a big reason why he got so popular. He just had a massive output. Was it good? No. Was it original? No.
Are you saying that James Dobson is the Taylor Swift of evangelical parenting books?
It's so funny because I said he's the Little Caesars of parenting books. Is it good? That's not the question. It's hot and it's ready.
Is it good? Don't worry about it, but buy one in every different color that she puts out.
There's like 12 different versions of the same thing. It's great.
Oh, God.
It also shows that Dobson has really just been saying the same shit his whole career and none of it particularly well. So why does this matter? It doesn't really. I personally find it to be distasteful. It makes everything feel like a money grab to me, but like that's not inherently some mortal sin or really a surprise. But I feel like I would be lacking in my duties of the show to not impress upon you how disorienting it can be when you are trying to read everything Dobson has ever written before. Like, I'm reading it and already trying to make sense of nonsensical arguments as a baseline. And then I'm like, hey, I think I've read this before. And usually I have, but sometimes some things are changed or it's the same story told a little bit differently. And then when did I read it before?
Right.
Now it all kind of blurs together. And often I've read it multiple times in multiple different books. So it's impossible for me to try to like trace how the story has evolved or not over time. And the books are printed and reprinted. The arguments are Frankensteined together and smeared across time. And it feels almost iterative, but there's an intentionality that's lacking to make it truly like a meaningful iteration on itself. I won't point out the many times he repeats himself as we go through this book, because at some point it stops being funny and just gets really boring, but it happens all the fucking time, and everything he does, and I'm going crazy and I hate it here. Two other notes about this book before we really begin. You know how Dobson likes those Q&A sections at the end of chapters?
Oh, yeah.
This entire book is written as a Q&A.
The whole entire book?
The entire book. It's a question from a supposed person who's reading his stuff, and then Dobson will talk about it. And they're like, well, you said this. Can you go ahead and clarify what this means over here?
So a question from Dobson that he wrote. Answered
Question from
by...
Dobson to Dobson, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he sounds very smart when he answers his own questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can I ask you something? I've never thought of this. Yeah. Were there anti-Dobson people like in the 70s? Like, was he ever on a panel where he had to actually answer questions that challenged him or challenged his ideas?
Were there anti-Dobson people? Yes. Was he ever really challenged? Not in a way that I've seen. Like, I don't hear stories of Dobson, like, as stupid as it was, right? Ken Ham debated Bill Nye the Science Guy, and although Ken Ham didn't actually meaningfully engage with anything Bill Nye was saying, at least he was, like, in a public venue where other dissenting ideas were being talked about somewhat together. As far as I can tell, that never happened to Dobson ever.
It feels like Dobson is always kind of like in a bubble of protection where he does not get challenged or he does not get like called out on the carpet or there's no, I mean, I get it was a different time where that wasn't happening in the way it does now, but like he protects himself. Even when we did like the D&D episode or I don't know, some other episodes where he's like, well, like, here's my little opinion, but I'm going to also just kind of back out of this. Right. Like,
yeah,
he's safe. He keeps himself safe.
He very much reads the comments, as it were, but he does not respond to them, right? He's aware of all the criticisms that exist of him, and he, like, shadow boxes them in his work, but he never directly, as far as I can tell, like, called somebody out or was, like, again, like a debate with somebody in any kind of public way.
Dumb.
The second note about this book is each chapter ends with learning discussion ideas. He writes about it, quote, "The objective is to permit the material to be used in Sunday school classes, neighborhood Bible study classes, or any other setting where it might be beneficial." It's like a little study guide for his ideas, which we'll talk about. Really don't need a study guide. But also, you'll notice in that list, not classrooms, not psychology spaces. And that's the only thing he's actually trained for. Again,
Mhm.
He's an associate professor of pediatric psychology at a hospital at this time, and he's writing stuff for Sunday school classes.
Mhm.
We'll talk about it more. For fun, I've included one question from each chapter at the end of each section. Sometimes they're funny, and sometimes they just make me want to die.
Emotions. Can we trust them?
Now we turn to the actual contents of the books. He talks about 4 emotions, feelings. He talks about guilt, romantic love, anger, and then interpreting our impressions.
What?
That's not really an emotion.
No.
How to understand our emotions is kind of what he's talking about, but it's more akin to how to understand what our gut is telling us, which isn't really about emotions.
So you're saying that he's talking about how to listen to our gut about this? 'Cause he seems very anti-listen to your gut.
When we have a gut feeling, what do we do with it?
Oh, I see.
The pamphlet that it was originally published under, Dobson talks about God's will, was the original title of that. But it's not an emotion that he's talking
Right.
about.
No. So you said guilt, romantic love, anger, and God's will? Okay, great.
So, part 2 of the script, let's talk about guilt. Quote, few human emotions are as distressing and painful as feelings of guilt and personal disapproval. When at a peak intensity, self-condemnation gnaws on the conscious mind by day and invades dreams by night. Since the voice of the conscience speaks from inside the human mind, we cannot escape its unrelenting abuse for our mistakes, failures, and sins. But is all guilt harmful? Certainly not. Dr. William Glasser, psychiatrist and author of Reality Therapy, asserts that personal disapproval for wrong behavior is absolutely necessary if change for the better is to occur. Perhaps the best example of this principle is seen in a religious conversion experience. Genuine repentance occurs only when we recognize our own sorrowful condition and bow at the feet of Jesus Christ.
Can I say a thing now?
Please.
Guilt absolutely is real and exists. And I don't actually disagree to some level. Like, I think it is actually kind of an important emotion to have in order to experience growth and change, to be able to say, like, oh, I hurt someone's feelings, I feel guilty, and now I have learned something so that I don't act that way again, right? Fair. But I also talk to my clients a lot, especially my female clients, about the sort of shadow side of emotions, right? And it was Fritz Perls from Gestalt therapy, which you know I love, because let's do the 60s all the time, baby. And but Fritz Perls said that the shadow side of guilt is resentment, and that a lot of times what we might be feeling is resentment that we turn in on ourselves, right? Especially women, because it is easier, or not easier, it is more socially acceptable to feel guilty than resentful, right? To be resentful is to be a bitch, right? And so I will often have my clients question, like, do you feel guilty about not doing this, or do you feel resentful that you were asked to do this labor that you shouldn't have to do, right?
That's such an interesting take on it, and that gets at some of the things that I want to talk about, but I really appreciate that. Dobson talks about basically 2 main ideas in this book. Part 1 is, should we feel guilty? Right? He assumes the conscience is connected to God's will. If we feel guilty about doing bad things and God determines good and bad, then our conscience is God's voice. But that's not always true. Sometimes people feel guilty when they shouldn't, or they don't feel guilty when they should. So a lot of this chapter is about determining when we should feel guilty, which is like the first half of what you were saying. The second half, I think, is notably absent. What else do we do with it?
Right.
And part 2 is how we develop the conscience. So it's a little bit of developmental psych stuff, sort of. You talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
But again, it's written in a Q&A format. So one of the first questions, Brooke, Dobson wants to know, what causes a person to feel guilty?
Shame. And that's where it gets complicated, because there's shame that I think is necessary and important. Like I said, like, I hurt someone, I feel ashamed of the way I behaved or what I said, right? And then there's like deep-rooted shame, which seems to me to be very tied to religion.
Often, yeah. I think that's while shorter, I think it's a much better definition. Dobson says, quote, I tend to believe that a sense of guilt occurs when we violate our own inner code of conduct. Guilt is a message of disapproval from the conscience which says, in effect, you should be ashamed of yourself. I think there's a lot of times when that's true, but I think what you're getting at is the times when we feel guilty even if we didn't necessarily violate our own inner code of conduct. I, perhaps not unrelated to the fact of my evangelical upbringing, will feel guilty about everything as the default. This is a thing I talk quite a bit in my own therapy about, where the best feeling in the world to me is when something bad happens and I know that it's not my fault. Just there's even if it's a terrible, horrible thing, there's such an intense feeling of relief.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that a dish broke in the kitchen doesn't violate my inner conscience at all, my inner sense of morality.
I
so
agree.
This is where I think Dobson's definition falls short.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because his definition, for the first time ever, I'm not going to be like super mean, because like everything Dobson does, it's like broadly kind of makes sense, right? Like we violate our personal code of ethics, or basically our morals, right? And we feel guilt. But it is extended so much. Like sometimes I have poor executive functioning, right? And then something gets mixed up and I feel guilt and shame. When really it's like, okay, I am apologetic or sorry that there was a mix-up and it has inconvenienced a person, but I don't really need to feel shame of myself morally for that failing, right? And I think that guilt starts to take over so much in so many ways that we use it, like you said, for everything, or we feel it all the time, and then we're just kind of living in shame, right? There's like a morality attached to it.
Dobson does say not all guilt is from God. A point which I think is good in theory, but his execution leaves something to be desired. Quote, I serve on the attending staff for the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles in the Division of Medical Genetics. We see children throughout the year who are victims of various metabolic problems, most of which cause mental retardation in young patients. Furthermore, most of these medical problems are produced by genetic errors. That is, each parent contributed a defective gene at the moment of conception, which resulted in an unhealthy child. When a mother and father realize that they are individually responsible for the distorted, broken, intellectually damaged child before them, the impact can be quite disastrous. A sense of guilt sweeps over some of the parents in such enormous quantities that the family is destroyed. Now, it is obvious that God is not the author of this kind of disapproval. He knows, even better than we, that the grief-stricken parents did not intentionally produce a defective child. Their genetic system simply malfunctioned. Whoa! So a few things.
Holy shit.
It feels like a good time to point out that Dobson was mentored by an avowed eugenicist. Eugenics being the belief that there's a correct way to be a person and that we should use science and policy to get there. Words like distorted, broken, intellectually damaged, and defective. He's not trying to be mean or insulting, but his distaste for disabled people is thick here. Bigotry isn't always rude. Sometimes it even has a PhD in its name and a cross around its neck. Many such cases, actually.
You did some good writing this week, Jake.
It is true that some parents feel guilty when they realize that their kids are disabled. The example is fine, I suppose. I hate the way he talks about it. But also, what are those parents supposed to do then? He just says, well, you don't need to feel guilty about that, and then nothing else. Like, okay, and then what? What? Recognizing a feeling is illogical doesn't get you very far.
But also, look how it's literally just built into what he said, right? Like, he's saying you may feel shame or guilt, which would come from this feeling that society is giving you that you produced a defective, broken, distorted child, right? It's like the problem is in the answer for him, right? It's very interesting because if we had a little bit less of an ableist culture and a little bit more like support for all of this, then maybe people wouldn't feel like they had failed at producing, a whole child or whatever it is that he wants to call it, right?
So, Brooke, what should someone do about guilt? We can use this as the example or just talk about it generally.
In this example?
Yeah, just like if someone is feeling guilt inappropriately.
I think they should go to a therapist. and talk to them about it. Honestly, like that's one of the
Sure.
main things I talk about with people, right?
Mm.
And understanding like the difference between moral guilt, I hurt someone, right, on purpose or
Mhm.
thoughtlessly, versus like I didn't live up to my potential, or I didn't do what is socially accepted, right? Or I didn't like this is I talk to a lot of my fat clients about this, right? The feeling of guilt or shame involved with not looking the way that they quote should, right? I think that if like should is part of it, I talk about that a lot, moral should, right? Then it's something to consider, right?
Mhm.
Should, I always say should according to who? If it's according to me, then that might be a moral thing you want to address, right? But if it's
Mhm.
according to society or according to God or according to, then I don't know.
Part of working with unnecessary guilt, I think, is a frame shift. In this case, a narrative therapist would say that a lot of parents have a
Mm-hmm.
problem-saturated story about having a kid with disabilities. I see how hard the world will be for them. I see that they won't live up to the expectations that I have for them, whatever it might be. And those feelings are real, but also, this is a full-ass person. They're going to live a life full of love and joy. And yes, hardship too. I'm not trying to be toxically positive about it. But you didn't create a defective person. You created a person. And just that frame shift can be helpful to start letting go of that guilt. Sometimes it's just saying this new story over and over and over again. Again, a narrative therapist would say this is reauthoring your story. Sometimes it's venting to people who support you just to get the emotions out of your system. That's a big part of the reason why therapy can be effective. And sometimes there can be meaningful rituals. One of the examples Dobson gives is a parent whose kid asked, "Can I cross the street?" It seemed fine, the parent said yes, and then the kid was hit by a car and died. A funeral, writing a letter to the kid expressing your apology, these can be useful things to do to start letting go of that guilt. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, because every person and every context is unique. But there are things that can be done.
Right.
Dobson just never addresses them. He basically says, "Don't feel that way," and then expects it to be all better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a little bit of that same idea. Again, I'm just thinking about it of like guilt and resentment getting a little mixed up, right? If
Mm,
your child is hit by a car, it's not your fault because you told your child to cross the street. It's a car's fault for hitting your child, right?
yeah.
And it's harder, again, I think that idea of like being angry than feeling guilty. I think sometimes people use guilt to avoid anger because I think
Mm-hmm.
anger will sort of take over, but I think guilt actually takes over.
Relatedly, I've seen a lot of people internalize situations as a bid for agency, I think. Like, yes, it is a terrible thing to feel like I was responsible for the death of my child, but if it was my fault, theoretically, I could have stopped it. Whereas life happens and that's terrible, that can be harder for people to accept. So I'm going to stay in this place of self-blame and guilt so I don't have to deal with the random cruelties of the universe.
I talk about that with a lot of people too, that idea that like it feels unbearable. I think that's because we all have somewhere within us an idea of like death, right? And death is totally unpredictable. It is uncontrollable. It's unavoidable, right? And so we start to try to control every other thing in our life. And the randomness or the chaotic nature of the world can feel really, really overwhelming and I think frightening for a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then there comes this idea of like, well, it's easier to say this is my fault than this is just totally like the random cruel nature of the world. And I think on the flip side, it's easier to say this is a miracle or a blessing than the random wonderful nature of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, you're really making me think today, Jake.
Happy Sunday. Dobson also acknowledges that some people who should feel guilt don't. Quote, "There are many examples of vicious, evil people who seem to feel no guilt for their actions. We can't know for sure, of course, but there's no evidence that Adolf Hitler experienced any serious measure of self-condemnation toward the end of
Stop
his life."
your mouth. Say it again. Does he think Adolf Hitler was so racked with guilt that that's why he killed himself?
No, he's saying there's no evidence that Hitler did feel guilt, even though
Oh,
he really should have. Which is a fair enough point. The invocation of Hitler again is A stylistic choice of Dobson's writing, I'll say very diplomatically.
This guy is obsessed with Adolf Hitler.
He also says, quote, perhaps the most effective silencer for the conscious is found in the widespread social opinions. One study reveals that 66% of today's college students feel it is okay, i.e. not guilt-producing, to have sexual intercourse with somebody they've dated and like a lot. Which are equal things, right? Hitler should feel bad about the Jews that he murdered, and college students should feel bad about having sex with their long-term boyfriend. So how does one decide if they are guilty? Dobson says we can test it in 3 ways. Emotions, how do I feel? Intellect, is it reasonable and biblical? And 3, was that my intention?
Okay.
It's not a bad test. It's not a great one, but like
bits and pieces. Let's break it down.
Emotion, intellect, will. How do I feel? Is it reasonable and biblical? And was it my intention?
So the first one,
just how do I feel? Do I feel guilty?
That's a good one, I think. How do I feel? What am I thinking about? What is my body doing in response to this? Right? I know that's
is it reasonable?
Is it
and
reasonable?
Biblical?
Fuck that. But the last one's where I actually have issue. Was it my intention?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Say more. I find that so interesting. I also have thoughts about that last one.
Most people, I would argue, are not walking around with the intention of trying to hurt people. I mean, some people are, but I think reasonable people that we know in our lives are not like, how can I be malicious and hurt this person? So again, another thing I talk about with clients a lot, right? Especially in couples, which is like, you can probably assume it was not someone's intention to hurt your feelings or hurt you. It doesn't mean your feelings weren't hurt. And it doesn't mean, it's intention and impact, right? So it doesn't mean that if you're the person who did it, that you shouldn't also have some feelings of remorse or guilt or regret or whatever about what happened. I don't think intention matters that much unless it was totally twisted by the person that received it, right? But it's not about like, it's not a get out of jail free card that you didn't mean to. You know what I mean?
That's so interesting. I am so on the same page, even though I wrote it from a slightly different angle. There's no like psychological backing to what he's saying here, right? Like he doesn't cite any theorists or psychologists or whatever. He just kind of like, here's 3 ways that I think that we can talk about guilt or not. This is a very Jesus-y book. He talks so much. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but like he cites Bible verses on pretty much every page. Like there's so much biblical scriptural references here. So from that lens, also your intention doesn't matter. I'm not a trained theologian, but I was very good at Awana quizzing, and that's technically more qualifications than Dobson had when writing this book. So there's a story in the Bible, in the Old Testament, where the Israelites are carrying the Ark of the Covenant. This is a very holy object, and it couldn't touch the ground. It also couldn't be touched by people. If they touched it, they would die. The Ark of the Covenant is the thing in Indiana Jones, in the first movie, where they opened it and people's faces melted off.
Yeah.
In a less cool Bible story, the Ark was being transported by oxen, and it stumbled. A guy named Uzzah instinctively reached out his hand to stop the Ark from falling. Quote the Bible, the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah and struck him down because he had his hand on the Ark. His intention wasn't to dishonor God, it was to protect a holy object from falling. His intentions didn't matter. God was angry at him and killed him. The test to determine guilt, it's not biblical. And that only matters because that's basically the entirety of his argument. He's not using psychological theories. He's largely talking about his ideas of Christianity, and not particularly well.
Yeah. I don't think I ever heard that story before.
I don't know why you would. It's a deep cut.
Yeah.
The second part of this chapter, how does a conscience develop? He says, rightfully so, it's a combination of nature and nurture. Great. He says that parents, largely it is a gift from the parents, is how he describes it. And he says that parents need to teach their kids morals by the age of 7. Quote, in conclusion, your child's first 7 years should prepare him to say at the age of accountability, here I am, Lord, send me.
7?
7.
I mean, I think you're learning morals your whole life. I think that it's because you have to have experiences, especially ones where you feel guilt, in order to learn them.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm not creating this. I've heard it somewhere, but that's the idea around like cell phones and texting with kids, or just like computers and kids, is that like they're not always seeing a person in real time responding. And
Yeah.
so that's like cyberbullying and stuff. It's like there's no receiver, right? Because it's different than when you're like walking in the halls at school and you say something to a kid and then you see their face fall and you see them cry or whatever, right? And then for some kids, probably not all, they feel that shame and guilt, right? But not by 7.
Yeah. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
So he says at the age of accountability, they're able to say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Age of accountability isn't actually a biblical thing. It's a thing that we talked about actually in our Left Behind series. This is the idea, you will start being responsible for your actions. Like, God will judge you. If you haven't accepted accepted Jesus as your savior by whatever date, that's when you go to heaven or hell. Which is not biblical. But even in biblical circles, I've never heard anyone say 7 is. I promise, we're going to get to why 7 in a second. But he then provides a checklist of things kids need to have learned by that age. Quote, essentially, the 6 scriptural concepts that follow provide the foundation of which all future doctrine and faith will rest. They comprise, in effect, the substance of the conscience. So, Brooke, let's take a look at what Dobson says is the substance of the conscience. There's 6 domains. There's questions therein that I don't really care to get into.
This is made up by Dobson?
Yep. I mean, there's like scriptural citations in this, but yep. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. But the fruit of the Spirit is self-control, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. These are, again, what Dobson says, the substance of the conscience.
How do people reconcile the commandment of love your neighbor as yourself with all the hatred towards so many people that is involved with Christianity, with evangelicalism?
They reconcile it by defining love badly.
Oh.
A Dobson would say, it is not loving to let someone live in sin and just accept their homosexuality.
Oh,
it actually is more loving to tell them, you're going to burn in hell forever because you kissed a guy once. Because you're trying to save them from hell. That's love.
Okay.
I also talked about this in my How I Became an Evangelical episode, but I grew up not understanding love your neighbor as yourself because I hated myself. And I thought that was the biblical way to be. This list, it's not great. One of them, teach me to do your will, for you are my God. Is he learning to cooperate and submit to authorities outside of self? Parent, teachers, policemen, etc. Obedience as a top virtue.
Thanks.
I don't know. How does that list strike you?
Bad. Yeah, and all I'm thinking about right now today is how interesting this is, because it is, I mean, I guess because it's emotions. Are they real? And we are therapists, right? So I'm thinking a lot about all the shit I have to help people undo that comes from these ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like even simple things like there's no such thing as authority when you are an adult, right? Like you don't have to be afraid of, there's hierarchies, but you don't have to be afraid of your boss or your doctor or anyone, right? In that sense that they have like inherent control over you. I know that's more complicated than what I'm saying, but I do a lot of
your doctor's not going to ground you.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's what I mean. I hear a lot of people saying they don't want to get in trouble. And I'm like, I don't know, outside of getting arrested, which I still don't think is like getting in trouble. Like, how would you get in trouble with your doctor, with your spouse, with your boss, right?
A question that I asked myself in this list is like, how did he pick these things? Clearly, it's not from psychological precepts. There's no like clinical psychology going into it. Again, there's lots of Bible verses. There's also a lot of language of evangelicalism built into this. So it's like using the language of Christianity, but it's also not like from the Bible. There's not a Bible verse that says, here are the 6 domains a kid needs to learn to build a conscience by the age of 7. The Bible
Mhm.
doesn't even say here's what the conscience actually is, right? So it's
Mhm.
not the Ten Commandments, it's not the Beatitudes, it's just kind of a hodgepodge of Bible verses haphazardly thrown together. And Dobson is betting that his PhD and love for God will smooth over the edges for you. And for a lot of people, he was right.
Mhm.
The thesis of this episode is that Dobson has always been doing theology with a facade of psychology, and by veering out of his lane so wildly, he does both really poorly.
Mhm.
Okay, so why 7? I went down a deep rabbit hole in this. There's a quote 2 pages earlier from Dare Discipline Kachow, quote, "All humans have no instincts, only drives, reflexes, urges, etc. There's a brief period during childhood in which youngsters are vulnerable to religious training. The concepts of right and wrong, which Freud called the superego, are formulated during this time, and their view of God begins to solidify." He doesn't cite Freud, but I think that's where he's getting this number. And now we come to the part of the show where Jake talks about Freudian psychology. Brooke, how much do you know about our old pal, Siggy F?
Oh yeah, I know about Siggy.
What do you know about his ideas of specifically like child development?
Oh, the stages, the like phallic stage, the poop stage,
Yes.
the oral stage. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Freud said kids progress through psychosexual stages of development. So
Yeah,
kids
that's
learn about the world through different pleasure centers. He does not mean sexual in the like orgasmic kind of sense. He means it as like anything that feels pleasurable. Reading this did make me want to do a lot of cocaine because I feel like that might make it make more sense.
yeah, he was a big fan, wasn't he?
Freud's general idea is that at different ages, we need to learn different things about the world, and the way that we learn it is through our pleasure centers. So, for example, if a kid was 2 years old, they'll be in the anal stage when they learn potty training. If toilet training was too harsh, kids could develop obsessiveness, stubbornness, tidiness. They could become anal retentive. Right? That's where we get that phrase. That's kind of Freud's thing. It's not that a 2-year-old's obsessed with anal sex. Freud's bad. I'm not a Freud fan. He's really interesting. Whatever.
Yeah.
The third stage is the phallic stage, which is about gender and sex, kids age 3 to 6. This is where kids, meaning boys, have to confront their Oedipus complex.
I mean, just so people are clear, I don't know if this was true for you in school, but like when I was in school, we were taught Freud as like a historical model, but not a current model that you would use. Like,
Correct.
most of this has been debunked and like isn't actively being used by therapists and psychologists.
I was trying to think. I don't really think I learned at all about Freud in grad school. Like, I have an undergrad degree in psychology, and I learned about Freud then and his kind of models of therapy, again, as a historical place of like, here's where some of our interesting ideas about the unconscious come from.
Right.
But there are neo-Freudians out there, but like, even they aren't like, yeah, Freud said this and therefore it's true.
Right. Yeah.
Dobson seems to be buying into a number of these things. I don't know if he believes in the Oedipus complex, but Brooke, what is the Oedipus complex?
When you love your mother and you are her son.
Yes.
You can learn a lot about the Oedipus complex right now on a reality show on Netflix called Age of Attraction, which is about young people and old people dating each other. And let's just say there's lots of talk about mom and dad on that show.
Interesting. Freud said that kids, boys, are born with an innate attraction to their mom and a desire to kill their dad because he's the good object that they want to be. Ages 3 to 6 is when they start resolving that Oedipus complex, and so there's more of an embrace of their dad and a rejection of their mom. More of that same-sex identification. This is when kids really learn what gender means to them. And by resolving the Oedipus complex, part of that, and by identifying with their dad, they then internalize their dad's conscience, their superego.
Don't worry, ladies. There's also the Electra complex.
I was just about to say the feminist version, because Freud is the feminist icon, is the Electra complex. This is supposed to happen by the age of 7. And I think that's where Dobson is getting this 7-year-old thing from. He doesn't say this at all. He says Freud's name once, pages earlier. I'm pulling it together. That's the only thing I can think of is why he says 7 specifically. Because that's not based, as you said, that's not based really in any actual clinical psychology. You are always learning your sense of morality. There's a time when that's more salient, for sure. But this year, I learned Do I value the idea of not going to jail or paying taxes to a country that's using my money to bomb brown children? That's a morally complex question that I'm grappling with. Right? We're always learning whatever. It is really notable to me, though, that Dobson gives one reference to Freud and kind of like borrows an idea poorly, but he can quote himself for 5 pages in the introduction. He can cite 9 Bible verses in a row, right? How he cites, who he cites is really telling. We're at the end of the anger section. The question that Dobson has, one of them in the learning discussion section, quote, Dr. Dobson cites the example of Walt, who became an atheist. How did guilt influence Walt's transition from believer to unbeliever? Read 2 Corinthians 11:14, 1 Peter 5:8, 2 Thessalonians 2:9, and list characteristics of Satan you discover in those verses. Is it logical to believe that Satan used guilt as a way to devour Walt's faith? Why? I picked that question mostly in the learning discussion sections. It's a lot of read this one specific Bible verse.
Mm-hmm.
Don't read the chapters around it. Don't read the context. Just read this one verse and then read this other verse and read this other verse. List characteristics of Satan. Part 2, romantic love.
Ooh la la.
Brooke, I have another thing to share with you.
Oh, good. I can't wait to hear more about James Dobson and romantic love. Breast to mouth.
Oh. I don't know why that gets me every time.
It's just so weird.
So these are 10 questions. You answer them true or false about ideas of love.
Haven't we seen these?
We sure have. I'm going to stop sharing. The whole point is just to be like, this is the chapter that I said is, as far as I can tell, verbatim shows up in other works that he's done.
Yeah.
The entire chapter is this list and going through it. This is the 3rd time we've talked about this list, by the way.
Oh my God. I can't believe I recognized it.
My brain hurts. Okay, so I actually don't have a ton to say about this section because we've talked about it multiple other times. There are 2 quotes that I want to point out. Quote, about premarital sex. This item represents the most dangerous of the popular misconceptions about romantic love, not only for individuals, but for the future of our nation. During the past 15 years, we've witnessed the tragic disintegration of our sexual mores and traditional concepts of morality. Responding to a steady onslaught by the entertainment industry and by the media, our people have begun to believe that premarital intercourse is a noble experience. Extramarital encounters are healthy. Homosexuality is acceptable, and bisexuality is even better. I never considered myself to be a prophet of doom, but I am admittedly alarmed by the statistical evidence of this nature. I view these trends with fear and trepidation, seeing them in the potential death of our society and our way of life.
I mean, I'm not even going to talk about this. Everything that's on my tongue to say, I know for sure I've already said on this podcast before. So please go to the I Kiss Dating Goodbye episode and hear all of our thoughts on this, right?
I like that he said, I never consider myself to be a prophet of doom, but I just think society's going to fall apart because 18-year-olds were fucking.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
Homosexuality is acceptable. Bisexuality is even better.
It's so good. Please, can you insert
bisexual? That's orgies.
There is one more quote that I want to share from this. Quote, these questions represent the 10 most common misconceptions about the meaning of romantic love. Sometimes I wish the test could be used as a basis for issuing marriage licenses. Those scoring 9 to 10 would qualify with honor. Those getting 5 to 8 items right would be required to wait an extra 6 months before marriage. And those confused dreamers answering 4 or less items correctly would be recommended for permanent celibacy. Ha 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 joke, but for real, hello eugenics again.
Yeah, let's definitely mix that up with the government that issues marriage licenses. That's a great idea. Also, that's insane.
His point in this chapter is that real marital love happens over time, probably doesn't need romance, and is the glue for society. He's wrong. We've talked about it at the end. The discussion question for this section, quote...
Also, how do you think his wife feels about these chapters? Like, oh, yeah.
We saw her at his seminars. She's in support. You don't need romantic love. It's just good to have, and clearly they have it. The chemistry between James and Shirley.
Oh, yeah. I want like a biopic about James and Shirley, because there's some secrets in there.
Who would play James Dobson in the biopic?
Oh my God, who would play James Dobson?
Readers, let us know.
Let us know. That is so fun to think about and horrifying. There is someone, but I can't think of who it is, but it's coming to me. All right, go ahead.
The discussion question that I've pulled, quote, how can we as a society enforce a strict code of sexual conduct and still preserve the freedom of the individual? Dobson very clearly is so worried about preserving the freedom of the individual.
Yeah, especially women.
Chapter 3, Anger. Dobson says, like guilt, not all anger is sinful. Sometimes anger is really just biochemical, or extreme fatigue, or extreme embarrassment, or extreme frustration, or rejection. Those aren't sinful. So what anger is sinful, quote, our inbred sinful nature gives rise to a response that we might call carnal anger, which must be distinguished from anger as a function of frustration or the endocrine system, or emotional and psychological needs. It is indeed contrary to everything holy and righteous, and cannot by any human striving be nullified. I see unacceptable anger as that which motivates us to hurt our fellow man, when we want to lash and cut and inflict pain on another person. So that's just a distinction he made up.
Yeah.
We can talk about how valid or not the distinction is. I think we will for a second, but that's just him talking shit. Again, there's no basis to this. There is a number of times in the Bible that it says, like, if you are angry at someone, you've committed murder in your own heart, be slow to anger, right? There's the idea that anger is sinful. So he's trying to say, like, well, but not all of it is, so how can I justify it? And how he defines it is just because he wanted to, essentially. He tries to say that anger isn't anger, it's fatigue or whatever, that it's biochemical, but also sometimes that it is sinful. It's just kind of like a jumbled mess. I can get behind some aspects of that, but there's nothing to unify his theory. He just kind of bounces around, contradicting himself without explanation or notice, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So how does one deal with anger? Quote, many psychologists seem to believe that all anger should be ventilated or verbalized. They say it is emotionally and psychologically harmful to repress or withhold any intense feelings. The question, can you harmonize the scientific understanding with the scriptural commandment that, quote, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry? There is undoubtedly some validity to the current view that feelings of anger should not be encapsulated and internalized. On the other hand, it is my view that mental health workers have taken the above observation and carried it to ridiculous lengths. Quote, some therapists now urge their counselees to curse and slam their fists down on a table until the expression of anger begins to feel natural. Another manifestation of this trend is seen in popular books now available in the field of psychology, which deals with assertiveness training, offering techniques for demanding and protecting one's rights. And finally, the women's liberation movement has spawned consciousness-raising groups across America, which generate intense anger in response to the issues which women interpret as insulting to their gender.
I was in my head right now. I was like, I feel like we're on a path towards feminism. There we go. Yep. Feminists. It is okay to be angry.
Yes. The truth about anger, I find he's trying to like parse out like some of it's a biochemical reaction or not. It's all a biochemical reaction. That's what emotions are. That's the nothing point.
Emotions, are they real?
Can you trust them? No. I do agree. He makes a point that like we use anger in kind of this umbrella term way, and that's not how it was understood at the time of the Bible. Which I find interesting that he can do that about anger, but not about homosexuality. There's much more of a case for it.
Or
I have heard anger.
Yeah,
it's very selective. I've heard anger described as a surface level emotion or a secondary emotion, meaning that typically there's something under it: sadness, anger, disrespect. Part of the work that I do around anger is helping people build a relationship to it. What is under it? What is that part trying to say? What is informing that anger? For what it's worth, I don't believe anger is sinful. I don't think any emotion is sinful. They just are.
I think anger is important. I try to talk to my clients about the difference between anger and like righteous anger, right? Are you angry that ICE is in Chicago? That's that you should be, right?
Yeah.
And is it going to spur you to try to make some change or get involved? Then great, right? Also, I don't think there's anything really wrong with anger. There's sometimes problems with the behaviors that come from anger, right?
Yes.
And if you know that and you can control that, and if one of the ways that you can control that is by slamming your fists on your desk or screaming into a pillow or venting in some other way, that's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a difference between we have anger and like violence too tied up with each other in some ways, I think.
Mm-hmm. There are people who have anger management problems.
Sure. Yes.
I think just statistically, I see more people who have trouble accessing their anger, right? Hey, if I feel guilty and it's my fault, maybe it actually is someone else's fault and you should be angry at them. But
Yeah.
that feels painful or scary or you're going to be a bad person or whatever. So let's not feel that.
Yeah. I think I have to maybe just clarify again that like most of my work is with women and
Mhm.
women who are in some way marginalized, right? Either their sexuality or their body or whatever. And so I'm thinking through a lens of like that, right? Yes, I think there are other types of anger that are harmful or that live in a person and become the person's sort of way that they see the world, and that is harmful. But the idea of experiencing anger ever, I don't think is harmful.
The way that I think about it with clients, like how to deal with anger, I talk about two different paths. You can lean in or you can lean out.
Mm-hmm.
Leaning in is yelling, breaking stuff. Sometimes you just need to release all the stuff that's built up inside of you. Not only is that fair, sometimes it's actually really important and healthy. And there's ways to do it safely. Venting to a friend can be great. Going to a rage room, excellent. Cussing out your waiter because they messed up your order, that's less of a good way of
Right,
doing
yeah.
it. Taking deep breaths can be leaning out, right? Choosing to let it go. Dialectic behavioral therapy, DBT, has a concept called opposite action, where you do the opposite of what your emotion is telling you to do. It can be a good way of kind of like undercutting that emotion and being more in line with your values.
I'm learning
Both-
IFS right now, and
Yeah.
I like this idea a lot, which is that like instead of trying to send things away or push them down or get away from them, like what if you just approach with curiosity? Like, why am I angry? What am I angry about? Where's this anger coming from? Right? Like talking to it instead of trying to ignore it.
With everything, really, when I focus on emotions with people, it's about building a relationship to those emotions. Also, I don't think anger or resentment is inherently a sign of not being healed or being sinful or whatever. It can be problematic. I have seen people hold on to a grudge in a way that really is detrimental to them. There are people who find so much power in healing and forgiving and letting go, but that isn't inherently the answer, because there is no one answer.
Right.
I will always be angry at Saul, the pastor who kicked me out of the church. I'm not going to go burn down his house. But also, me living my life now does not mean that I have to, like, forgive him. No, he
Yeah.
can chuck on a dick, and it does not influence everything that I do throughout the course of my day.
Right. I think also like one of the things I talk to clients about is the difference between forgiveness and like radical acceptance, right? Which
Mhm.
is to say like, I don't forgive you. I understand that this is the truth of what happened, or this is the truth of who you are. I'm not struggling right now to accept the reality of the situation, but that's different than forgiveness.
Dobson's advice on how to deal with anger is only those leading out things. By going to an offender and showing a spirit of love and forgiveness, by making the irritation a matter of prayer. And now I'm afraid we must make a small detour. There's a specific Q&A that I want to get into. It's a little bit lengthy, but I'm going to read at least most of this. Quote, a very close friend of mine, whom I'll call Martha, has a father who has never revealed any depth of love for her. Though she is grown and has 2 children of her own, she continues to hope that he will suddenly become what he has never been. This expectation causes Martha repeated disappointment and frustration. When her infant son failed to survive his first week of life, her insensitive father didn't even come to the funeral. He still shows little interest in Martha or her family, a fact which has caused deep wounds and scars through the years. After receiving a letter from Martha in which she had again mentioned her father's latest insult, he refused to come to her son's wedding, I sent her a few reactions and suggestions. She obtained so much help for what I had written. She shared it with 3 other women experiencing similar frustrations from the people who have failed them. Finally, she returned a copy of my letter and asked me to include it in a future book of this nature. It appears below. Here's Dobson's suggestions to Martha. Quote, Martha, I am more convinced every day that a great portion of our adult effort is invested in the quest for that which is unreachable in childhood. The more painful the early void, the more we are motivated to fill it later in life. your dad never met the needs that a father should satisfy in his little girl, and I think that you're still hoping that he will miraculously become what he's never been. Therefore, he constantly disappoints you, hurts you, rejects you. I think you'll be less vulnerable to pain when you accept the fact that he cannot, nor will he ever, provide the love and empathy and interest that he should. It is not easy to insulate yourself in this way. I'm still working to plug a few vacuums from my own tender years, but it hurts less to expect nothing than to hope in vain. I would guess that your dad's own emotional childhood experience account for his own emotional peculiarities, and can be viewed as his own unique handicap. If you were blind, you would love him despite his lack of vision. In a sense, he is emotionally blind. He is unable to see your needs. He is unaware of the hurt behind the unpleasant incidents and disagreements, the funeral of your baby, the disinterest in your life, and now Bob's wedding. His handicap makes it impossible for him to perceive your feelings and anticipation. If you can accept your father as a man with a permanent handicap, one which probably caused when he was vulnerable, you will shield yourself from the ice pick of rejection. This letter was of help to Martha, not because it improved her distressing circumstances. Her father is no more thoughtful and demonstrative today than he was in years past. It is Martha's perspective of him that has changed. She now sees him as a victim of cruel forces in his own childhood, which nicked and scarred his young psyche and caused him to insulate his emotions from the outside world. Since receiving this letter, Martha has learned that her father is subject to some extremely traumatic circumstances during his childhood. Among other things, his aunt told him unsympathetically that his father had died suddenly, and then she reprimanded him for severely crying. Martha's father is, as I suspected, a man with a handicap.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, most people, like, hurt people, James Dobson, we get it. But, like, most people are acting out or being cruel because there is something in their life that, like, yes, like, obviously. But that doesn't mean they get to, and it doesn't mean that it's your job to hold that for them. And it doesn't mean that they don't have to take any accountability or do any work around that. That's why we go to therapy, to break those cycles.
Yes. That first part of it, of his response, don't expect him to show up for you, I actually think that's pretty good advice.
Yes, I do too.
Like, so many other people have said it, it's not a unique insight from Dobson. But sure, I totally agree. Yeah. Don't expect people to show up for you if they won't. Don't set everyone up to fail. Mm-hmm. Much easier than done, but I actually think that is a really meaningful piece of advice. Mm-hmm. And again, sometimes it does help to learn to forgive and let things go. To see those who hurt us as people who are hurting. That can be powerful. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's necessary for healing. I don't think one needs to forget and forgive to move on, to recover from bad experiences, and to live a healthy life. Anger can point to justice. Go for it.
Yeah, I think that actually there's a piece of that is helpful for healing, but it's not the piece that Dobson's talking about. So I think that what I see is, like, when you can understand where, like, your father's behavior comes from, and maybe it's from somewhere in his childhood, then maybe you can start to understand that it doesn't come from you, right? It's not like because of who you are that you're getting treated this way, and maybe you can relieve some of that. But it doesn't mean that then it's over. That's not the last step, right? That's just a piece to help you kind of remove yourself from that in that way as the cause.
There is no right way to heal. A problem with I have this book in general is, I don't know, man, it kind of depends. For some people, I'm sure this is good and helpful advice, but I have seen it so often used to dismiss real hurt. It's weaponized forgiveness, a just get over it kind of attitude that doesn't demand better from people in our lives and the world around us. It's usually applied more so to marginalized people, like women, to pressure them to not seek accountability for their abuse, like sexual abuse from men in positions of power. He was hurting too can ring very hollow in cases like that. But Jake, you say, that's a little much. We don't need to catastrophize or blow things out of proportion. Don't be a Dobson. The reason I wanted to quote this in full specifically is this later got turned into a blog post. A lot of Dobson's blog posts were just reprinting of sections from his books. Shocking. And this blog post was set by one Jeffrey Epstein as advice for someone to get over their anger at their dad.
Oh yeah, you showed me this.
Weaponized forgiveness is the undertone and sometimes pretty overtone of this chapter, right? Someone hurt you, just forgive them. And again, sometimes for sure, yeah. But if it's just that and it's just that all the time, then people aren't held accountable for their actions.
Yeah, also there's a difference between someone hurting you, like hurting your feelings, and someone abusing you chronically.
Yes.
You don't just have to forgive that in that
Mm-hmm.
way. Woof.
Okay, our last chapter, impressions.
Oh yeah, this everyone's favorite feeling.
Dobson says you can kind of understand God's will, but most people do it wrong. Quote, it appears that God's will is most often determined by inner feelings and impressions. I just felt this is what God wanted me to do, is a typical explanation. Thus, a fleeting emotion or subtle impression may lead a person to accept or reject a job, move to a different city, return to college, or even plunge into marriage. From the flimsiest evidence, we conclude God told me to, or God sent me, or God required me. And that's bad because emotions are fleeting. Quote, he gives a context. I'm not quoting the context. The note that I put in for myself was one time at band camp, I was seized by the strong impression which conveyed the unmistakable message you're going to lose someone very close to you in the next 12 months. A member of your immediate family will die. But when that happens, don't be dismayed. Just continuing trusting and depending on me. The anniversary of my morbid impression came and went without consequence. So that's what I mean by like, okay, we get these feelings. I feel I should marry this person. I feel someone's going to die. How do I know how accurate those things are or not? Which isn't even really about emotions at that point. Again, it feels like it's just four kind of unrelated things shoehorned into one book for profit.
Mm-hmm. That is what it is.
He finally cites somebody else on trying to understand our impressions. He cites a guy, Martin Wells Knapp, Knapp, which we'll talk about in a second. But this guy had a 4-pronged test to understand, is this feeling that you have really of God? Is it scriptural? Is it right? Is it providential? Is it reasonable? Okay. Interesting thoughts. It buys into a lot of premises that I don't believe, but my issue when, and we've talked about this before, when anyone says like, oh, I'm trying to interpret the will of God, is a lot of times people use that as an excuse for what they wanted to do anyway. So is it scriptural, for instance? My issue here is that the Bible can be interpreted in infinite ways. Famously, there is no consensus to what is scriptural. The same Bible inspired slave owners and segregationists, as well as abolitionists and Martin Luther King Jr. Right? What is slavery scriptural? Is it okay to own slaves? It depends on who you ask, unfortunately.
I mean, this podcast says no.
This podcast says no. We take the very bold stance that segregation and slavery are indeed bad. We're very brave. When we read a text, Bible or not, we don't simply absorb meaning from it. It is a collaborative experience to create meaning based on, yes, the text, but also our own priors, the culture we're in, and a lot of other factors. Claims of objectivity reinforced simply by more subjectivity. And then, is it reasonable? Quote, the will of God can be expected to be in harmony with a spiritually enlightened judgment. We will not be asked to do absurd and ridiculous things which are devoid of judgment and common sense. I don't think that's a bad way to test our gut instincts. But again, it's not biblical. In the Bible, God asks people to do unreasonable things all of the time. That's like his big move, right? Like murder your only child on a hilltop, fight a giant with a slingshot, march around a city 7 times instead of fighting them, right? And those are objectively unreasonable things to do. That guy who cited, Martin Wells Knapp, he was a radical holiness preacher, which is the theological tradition that Dobson's a part of.
Radical holiness?
Yeah, the idea that we are, by accepting Jesus, we are in that moment purified and created holy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Again, well, I'm doing this because I'm holy and now I'm attuned to God, not just because it's what I want to do, and I'm finding ex post justification for the thing I wanted to do anyway.
God, I know we're not at the end, but I just want to say I really hate this guy.
Yeah, he's the worst. He gives an example of how he interpreted God's will. He wanted to sell his house, quote, for 2 weeks, a for sale sign stood unnoticed in the front yard. It didn't attract a single call or knock on the door. My prayer was answered in the negative. I took down the sign and waited 12 months before asking the same question of the Lord. This time, the house sold for my asking price without a nickel being spent on advertising or real estate fees. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that the Lord had another home in mind for us. That's how he
Oh my God, I love God as lottery.
There's a question that's asked of him by him after that. How do you know the sale of the house wasn't explained by economic circumstances or simply the fact that another interested buyer came along? Can you say definitively that God determined the outcome? Matters of faith can never be proved. Which I guess is fair. Like, of all the things that have been said this episode, I'm like, sure, at that point, whatever. There's a sequel to the house story. Quote, I later felt that I should tithe some of the profit from the house, but I wasn't sure. I asked for another sign. After class, I received a note from one of the young men. Don't you think God is entitled to the real estate fee for selling your house? He asked for a sign and got a sign. My attitude toward the Lord is simply this. I will do whatever you require of me. The only thing I ask will be that you convey your will in a definite manner that requires minimum reliance on my unpredictable feelings. He is usually satisfied with the request. I think anyone who says they can interpret the will of God needs to be looked at very skeptically.
I agree.
I think there's so much humility to, I think this is the right thing to do. I think that's honest. I think that's fair. And you can make decisions based on that.
Mm-hmm.
But saying it's because I can understand the will of God, that is when we really get into like a power trip kind of thing.
I love it when he talks like that, when he's like, well, God told me the other day. God was telling me this. I'm like, what is that you're hearing?
Again, for a psychologist, it bothers me. He basically talks about OCD without naming it OCD. Like, he mentioned a couple people who have a true, deep, innate feeling that someone's going to die or something bad is going to happen, and how that's not of God. What obsessive thoughts are.
Yeah, it is. Intrusive.
Or can be. Yeah. And again, what do we do with those feelings when they're not true? It doesn't say anything about that. If it's not the will of God, okay. But then what? But then what?
Mm-hmm. This is a sidebar. We don't even have to, I almost said print this. We don't have to print this in the newspaper. That is, I
In
hate
the
James
blog.
Dobson. But don't you think it's interesting that in a book about emotions, he chose 4 and none of them were sadness?
That is interesting, yeah.
I'm kind of curious about how, and he's like a psychologist, so you would think that like depression would be something he would be able to speak on, right? But he never really does.
Or anxiety.
It's all just behavioral stuff.
Again, any headline that ends with a question mark can be answered by no. Emotions, can you trust them? He is saying, not really. What was that? What is this book?
I want that to be in the Q&A. What was
question.
that?
What?
Yeah, we have a question.
One of the things that upsets me the most about the life and legacy of James Dobson is his professional qualifications. When he wrote this stupid fucking book, he was an associate professor at a hospital. That's a very real, important job. You need lots of qualifications for it. And this book, seemingly about something in his lane, he's a mental health expert talking about emotions. It's so not that. It's so out of his lane. It's not just that he swerves out of his lane, it's that he's never in it to begin with.
Right. People just trust him.
Yes, they do trust him. Most therapists these days are taught under the scientist practitioner model. We are taught to integrate scientific research into our clinical practice. It is a combination of science and art. It is a requirement across the field to stay up to date on your research. Even once you're fully licensed, you have to continue taking classes, continuing education credits to make sure that you're up to date in this way. As I stated before, Dobson doesn't cite any study. He barely talks about psychological models, and usually only to critique them.
Mm-hmm.
He does, though, spend so much time in this book citing himself and the Bible and talking about how some emotions come from Satan. And he's allowed to believe that, but that's not what he's trained in. It's like he takes having a PhD to mean he's an expert in everything.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of ethical clinical practice is recognizing the limits of one's own competence. A version of that idea is in every code of ethics. As a marriage and family therapist, my code of ethics, it's framed as MFTs do not diagnose, treat, or advise on problems outside of the recognized boundaries of their competence.
Yep. There's a version of that in our code of ethics too, counseling. And also the type of therapy that I practice is client-centered therapy, where the number one rule is the client is the expert on themselves and their own experience.
Yes. By trying to do theology masked as psychology, Dobson fails spectacularly at both. If I had a supervisor or a professor who taught like this, I would report them.
Yeah.
Not because I disagree about their religious beliefs, because that's not what this job is about.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to hear about how to determine the will of God, I'd go to a seminary, not a hospital. That's just not his job.
Right.
He's a hack and a fraud. He's a minister dressed in a lab coat. And he's been that way since the very beginning. I hate James Dobson.
I hate James Dobson. And when you said he's a minister, I thought you were going to say he's a menace. But he is a menace.
That too. He's a menace dressed in a lab coat.
Yeah. Readers, please, for our own joy, send us who should play James Dobson in our James Dobson biopic that we're going to.
And Shirley.
And
now,
Shirley.
We haven't talked a lot about Shirley. We saw one clip of her very briefly in a video. She is very severe looking, and I say that actually as a compliment. Like she's very serious.
Oh, yeah. I think Shirley might be kind of a badass, actually.
Yeah, well, let's not get too carried away. But yes, so
she's a feminist icon.
let's. Yep, feminist icon Shirley Dobson. Let's dreamcast this.
Yeah, and then we also would need to cast Myrtle and Papa Dobson for some flashbacks.
Mm-hmm,
we would need to cast Michael Ferris, who of all the people, I just really.
I like that that's your villain in this.
I don't know why. I just like. Bleh.
You're correct.
Then, yeah, maybe Bill Gothard. I'm trying to think of all the names I can remember. Let's just get a whole cast going.
As we're at the end, I want to send a huge thank you to our certified haters, those who have joined our Patreon at the $10 tier. You all are my personal hero. I am blown away by the support and love and enthusiasm that we've received on the Patreon. So, huge thanks to people whose name I'm absolutely going to mispronounce, and I apologize. Cardamon, Callie Ann, Hannah B, Sawyer N, Stacy, Des, Carissa P, Timothy N, Jared B, Melody S, Jen F, Joanna, Katie M, Drew, Jerry L, Mrs. M, Crystalite, Tora W, Chad S, Margaret H, Christopher W, Melody B, my favorite name, Bunny with a Switchblade, Unwritten Page, L, Ben, Tyler M, Lindsay D, Jennifer A, Betsy C, Kira T, Spruce, Jamie B, Jenna K, D, and Sean L. Thanks, adore all of you.
I'd like to give a shout out to the people who joined on the $5 level, the Brooke level. I'm not going to say all their names, but I love you all.
You all are listed on our website, IHateJamesDobson.com, under our sponsors tier. So if you want to appreciate all of the wonderful people who made my fucking week, you can check them out there.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, readers.
Bye.
I Hate James Dobson is a product of Red House Media and is a labor of love, spite, written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Jake. I'm honored to be joined on this journey by my amazing co-host, Brooke. If you're enjoying the show, please consider rating and reviewing it. And if you want to connect with us more, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/IHateJamesDobson. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, Reddit, Blue Sky, TikTok, and Facebook at I Hate James Dobson. You can email us at IHateJamesDobson@gmail.com. We have merch available at IHateJamesDobson.printful.me, or, if all of that's too much, simply go to IHateJamesDobson.com to find everything about the show. Our theme music is by Moonbase, and the song is called Trendsetter. Special thanks, as always, to Drew, Lindsay, DJ, Jack, Gary, and Karina. And thank you, reader, for enjoying our show.
I'm sorry. Can we pause for 1 second? I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Fig just almost lit herself on fire. Okay. I'm so sorry. She literally jumped up here. Like, I brought her up here, but then she was like, face in the fire. So my bad. Sorry. Carry on. Thank you.